hello Canto, hello One Caribbean, Wadaguan, everything I
beautiful people. Represent where you're from. Let me see those flags. Come on, let's go. We are one Caribbean. Caribbean people. We are one Caribbean. Despite ethnicity, let's share love and unity. Jamaican, but we love Trinidad. To be a god, to the beef them bad. Belize, Bahamas and Suriname. Big up, St. Lucia, every nation. North Sound, we are Kingdom of Cayman. St. Kitts and Nevis. Beautiful beaches, God living. Wicked, but Kingston are the sweetest. Caribbean. We are one Caribbean people. We are one.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we are one Caribbean people. I believe that we are a force to reckon with. I firmly believe that the most intelligent minds that exist in the world has some connection to the Caribbean, if not from the Caribbean. I believe that we are the ones who are going to drive our future. And if you've followed me over the years at Canto, I normally talk about artificial intelligence and how it's going to affect video surveillance. That was originally going to be my theme, but then I realized that there is something that is absolutely more important. And that is for us to take up the mantle that has been asked of us and create something that will truly define the Caribbean.
On size, but on vision. We must stop asking, is the Caribbean ready? And instead ask, what is required of us to lead? Because readiness is not a matter of capacity. It is a matter of will.
Readiness is not a matter of capacity. It's a matter of will. And I believe we will generation in and driving our own path. For that, I give you this solution.
French islands of the Caribbean. We rise with a new unified digital anthem. Say it with me. We are one Caribbean. Currently, artificial intelligence doesn't understand us. AI has 0% representation, 100% bias, and 44 million people underserved. This is the stark reality of AI bias against the Caribbean. This is a problem I intend to fix.
AI rejects our job applications, misunderstands our dialects, denies our loan applications and excludes our youths. We're being judged by algorithms that don't even know we exist. Traditional solutions are slow, weak, expensive, and reactive. We can't wait for big tech. We can't afford to follow slow regulations. And we won't accept being digital second-class citizens. We need a Caribbean solution to a Caribbean problem.
Meet ARI, the reasoning and integrity engine, designed for the Caribbean, an AI trained on Caribbean culture, language, and expression, trained on Caribbean voices, fluent in Patois, Creole, and our cultural nuances, built by us, for us. Why, you ask? Because good vibes and good AI go hand in hand and makes everything AI. This isn't just another AI. It's our one Caribbean digital emancipation.
IRI embodies cultural vibrancy and technological innovation. We're assembling the most vibrant Caribbean data set ever created. From calypso and reggae lyrics, to poetry, politics, and patois, we're assembling the most vibrant Caribbean data set ever created. Explore the vision of a digital emancipation for the Caribbean. We're building a digital mirror that reflects who we are. One Caribbean.
Dive into the creation of the most vibrant Caribbean dataset. Our three-phase strategy includes: Phase 1, build our cultural foundation. Phase 2, deploy ARI as the watchdog against bias. And Phase 3, integrate across the Caribbean and export our expertise to the world. As one Caribbean will transition from being AI consumers to exporters of AI ethics.
Imagine this. One Caribbean becomes a global leader in AI ethics and cultural competency. Caribbean governments require audits. Caribbean universities demand cultural fluency. We will police all other AI so they become bias-free. That's transformational. Canto, ITC members, you are the key. You run the networks. You build the trust. You connect every island and every home. You are the bridge between vision and reality. We don't need Silicon Valley. We need collaboration for this unified and groundbreaking strategy. IRI is more than innovation. It's a Caribbean export industry in its infancy. With a $2 billion market, $50 million audits, and 10K jobs, the economic impact is immense. Let us, as One Caribbean, launch this movement. From partnerships and prototypes to pilots and regional rollout. Let's move. One Caribbean.
Every day we wait. Caribbean voices go unheard. Every day we hesitate. Our digital independence fades. Let us stand together. Code together. Lead together. From the region that gave the world reggae comes the next great gift. AI with a soul. One love. One Caribbean. Say it with your chest. OneCaribbean.ai. IRI Canto.
Canto 2025. One Caribbean. Migan.
I think it's time for us, as a collective, to do something that shocks the world. I'm Jamaican, and so everything is always IRI. And that is the reason why the AI will be called IRI. But it's not just called IRI for that. It also means that it's AI with reasoning and integrity engine. Because we're going to be the ones that force every other AI to recognize us. Where the biases exist, we will come in, we will identify them, we will point them out, and we will take up the mantle So my call for you today is let us unite as one Caribbean. Unified, moving together. And in closing, before any questions, I will say this. I have two asks. One, let One Caribbean become the One Caribbean anthem. And two, let guava become the fruit of the Caribbean. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
Again, we give it up for Mr. White for his presentation, getting the ball rolling. Thank you so much. So we're just going to have a moment where they're going to run one of the auxiliary chords for the next presentation as we get ready for the CEO of One-on-One, Ricardo Allen, who will take us through, again, today's overwhelming theme as we hear from different presenters. And, you know, things are so tight today, some presenters, of course, will give their presentation and head immediately to the airport because some will be leaving today. But again, we give thanks that we're able to get through and get our conversations going. Again, feel free. I believe we're still going to put the QR code up at some point during the course of the day so that you could win that 3,000 US stay for two right here in Bahamas, I believe. One of the neighboring islands, you'll get a chance to really showcase and relax yourself. So make sure when that QR code is up on the screen, you put yourself in a game. So I believe all is set as we get ready for the CEO of One-on-One. That's the man right there, Ricardo Allen. He joins us next. Let's give him a warm canto welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here on this, the final day of Canto. Today I'll be kind of just taking you through something that is very interesting, quite fascinating, really. Last year, I kind of touched on it a little in terms of sharing with you guys the work that we're doing in education. Now, just to give you kind of like a background on One-on-One, we're a company that's created 10 years ago. I created a company leaving university. I studied actuarial sciences. And I was fascinated with math and algorithms, meaning the process of solving problems. So right there in Jamaica, started the company, it was about 2 of us, and my goal was very simple at that time. All I was attempting to do was to use the fact that if I can know how someone learns, and I can have some statistical understanding as to the knowledge that they have, chances are I could predict what they need to learn next and how best to learn it. And so over the past 10 years, I've kind of invested all my energies with a team across the Caribbean to build this technology. Today, I'm launching that technology, and you will see exactly the power of personalized learning. Just as an update from last year, about a month ago, I woke up to news that we made the list, Time Magazine, top 350 edtech company in the world. I think that is brilliant for Caribbean companies. When I saw the list, I woke up my wife, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a scam, and then I Googled and I saw my name on there. It was crazy. But there's nothing more powerful than creating something from scratch and kind of achieving this kind of reward. So, we've been around for the past 10 years. We have a team of about 43 persons, 25 developers and PhDs, researchers, and so on, kind of studying how people learn and trying to personalize their learning. We've gotten a number of awards, and we currently work with major regional governments to do many things, among them digitalizing your education system. Last year, I would have shared that in Bahamas only, the Minister of Education can sit at her desk and see just about every data point in the education system. Every report card for students and parents are generated online, and because we're measuring and tracking the data, we can do fantastic things with that data. In terms of what we do, right, we focus on 3 big things. One of them is obviously connecting people to learning, digitalizing education system, and creating real-time content for people. So just imagine if I know what you know, I know what you don't know, then chances are I could create content on the fly that teaches you based on those gaps, right? In the same way a teacher would. So that's what we do. So today we're going to launch Una Intelligence, and this is what we've been kind of working on. And what is Una Intelligence? Well, it's a new type of intelligence that kind of focuses on understanding just about everything that you know. It gets into your brain, understanding how you learn and how you've learned things over the years. One of the things I've always said to Percy is that I want you to imagine you're a child. And your child is probably in high school and they come home and they say, boy, I don't understand math. And you're wondering why. Yesterday they did, today they don't understand, and they said it's the worst subject ever. Well, chances are when they were in grade 3, they probably got an 85% on math. They went to grade 4, they proceeded, didn't they? They went to grade 4 and they got probably, I don't know, a 70%. And then they proceeded throughout the education system simply because they passed. But what happened to that 15% of knowledge that they didn't get? What happened to that 10%? What we're trying to do is to track that from their young all the way throughout their academic journey into the workforce. Ladies and gentlemen, UNA knows what you know, it knows what you need to know, and it closes that gap. I'm going to show you a little video that tells you exactly what we're doing and the problem that we're trying to solve. Do enjoy.
We live in a world of infinite information. So how do we know what we don't know? What are the signals that reveal the gaps? You start by understanding your strengths. Una Intelligence helps you see what you know. And clearly illuminates your opportunities for growth.
This is in a corporate setting, by the way. Someone is asking about AML. Finds all the courses that relates,
this
serves it up.
Is precision learning. The power to stop searching and start building. Delivering precision knowledge in our schools, turning challenge into achievement. In our workplace, turning individual skills into team success. In our world, turning human potential into progress. Introducing Una Intelligence, personalized knowledge acquisition. In schools, in the workplace, everywhere.
And this is coming to school September 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, this is something we've worked very hard on. We believe that if we can enable every child to know the knowledge that they have, the knowledge that they don't have, we can also enable teachers to be able to see that. And if teachers see that, then they can facilitate knowledge acquisition. In the workforce, we believe that in real time, through conversations, we share information about what we know and don't know. We want to track that and want to enable workforce and upskilling through a similar model. This is a solution that we think we're building to serve not just the Caribbean, but a global audience, made from a Caribbean company to serve the world. I thank you very much for listening to me this morning. I'm not sure if I have time for any questions. I know it's the last day everybody wants to go, so I don't want to keep you. But if you have any questions, I'll be around. Thank you. Sure.
Looking at education and, of course, everything in that sector from a new lens, the digital lens. Again, well done there to, of course, the young CEO, very vibrant and up to the time, up to the speed. As we continue with our segments and our sessions today, of course, we just had Ricardo, we heard from Carl earlier. We're getting now for a panel discussion. It's on regional partnerships, and your moderator, the director of the NTRC out of SVG, the St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who just had their carnival, the hottest carnival in the Caribbean, a great time a couple of weeks ago. We want to welcome the moderator for this session, Apollo Knights, to take us through, and he will introduce all the different panelists as they get into that very important talking point. Again, regional partnerships on this, the final day of Canto 2025.
Good morning, good morning. So I'm going to be Apollo this morning. We've got a bit of a schedule change. Some of the panelists were unavoidably absent, so I'm Andre Griffith. You saw me here yesterday with one panel, but as I said, some of the panelists were unavoidably absent, so this morning what we're going to have Mr. Apollo Knights from the NTRC, NTRC St. Vincent. And we're going to have Mr. Albert Daniels from ICANN. I'll just give you a bit of an introduction to each of them. And we'll have two presentations following which we're going to have, if time permits, some interaction from the floor. So I'm going to give Mr. Knights, who spent over 2 decades working in the areas of telecommunications, development, and regulation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He is now with the National Telecommunications Regulatory Commission of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Prior to that, he was in the Ministry of Communications and Works and involved in the liberalization process of the telecoms markets across the Eastern Caribbean. Albert, I think Albert is no stranger to Canto, as indeed is, Apollo is not a stranger to Canto either. But Albert is with ICANN. He's a member of the Global Stakeholder Engagement Team for Latin America and the Caribbean, and he leads engagement in 32 Caribbean territories and also leads specialized projects in ICANN. So how are we going to do it? There are 2 presentations. It's a bit, again, of an unusual format for a panel, but we'll start off with Apollo, and then we'll have Albert, following which we hope to get to some interaction from the audience. So first off, Apollo, and to you.
Morning all. Yeah, thank you, Andre. So I just when I was asked to be on this panel about regional partnerships, I was thinking, how can I bring a little value to those here today, based on my experiences over the years. So I was thinking, if I could just get one person in this room after the presentation to make the decision to come off the fence, someone who is there and something new that they want to go after, but instead of going it alone, to go in a partnership. So if I can achieve that, I'll be happy. Right, so I just want to touch on one partnership first I was involved with, the regional regulatory partnerships, when we were opening the market 25 years ago in the OECS region. The problem was, do we make separate regulatory bodies for each island? And we said, the cost involved will be high for each country. Also, this cost will be passed on to the consumer. And also the lack of the human resource available to staff these entities. So we agreed on a regional framework. So we have an entity in St. Lucia called ECTEL, and we have 5 NTRCs in the 5 countries. It's a framework with the ECTEL Treaty, the Telecom Acts in each country, very harmonized, so we work together. And I think this model has reduced the regulatory costs, and all costs that are reduced is passed on to the consumer. It's also provide a more easier space to work in for the providers. Instead of having to learn different regulatory systems, they can work with a common system. And I think it's a good approach. There's some challenges, but I think it's good. And I want to bring that to the current work we're doing. We're currently working in a new framework for the last 2 years. All the regulators in the Caribbean, in the CARICOM region, being facilitated by the Caribbean Telecommunications Union and funded by the ITU. We are looking at a new framework for the region, our new regulatory framework. And we're not there yet, we're close. We're having some challenges with some of the regulators. But I'm asking you, again, if you work with these regulators in the region, if you can show them the reason why we should work together in a partnership, I think it'll be best for the whole region. If we have a common framework, we don't have to agree on everything, but if it's common, we can provide an easier framework to work in, which will benefit the consumers. The second example I want to touch on is the CASIP subsea fiber. This has 7 landing stations, was commissioned in 2019, involves 2 countries in the Eastern Caribbean, St. Vincent and Grenadines and Grenada, and connects the populated islands in the Grenadines that we share together. Before this, it was an issue of inclusion. These persons in these islands had maximum 3 megs connection to the homes, while the mainlands had 100 megs. So we saw a gap that was there. There was some funding from the World Bank available, and we decided to do a public-private partnership to get the providers to put the rest in it. When the bid came in, the provider that bid didn't see a business case, even with the subsidy. They said, we can't do it, doesn't see a return. But the government saw the reason to have this done for the consumers, the inclusion, and they agreed to put the funds in. So we have a special arrangement here where 2 countries came together, 1 contract, put up 80% of the money, the rest from the World Bank, the regulators involved, the provider involved. It's a 15-year contract. The provider manages it, maintains it, and provides the service, which everyone has the same capacity now. Also very important is the form of resiliency in this framework. When Hurricane Beryl hit in last year, July the 1st, which the Prime Minister of Grenada mentioned yesterday, all communications were lost with 4 of these islands for days. And the first space that we had some connectivity came back on was a Wi-Fi hotspot that was connected to one of the landing stations. So the cable was not damaged, all the landing stations were operational, and within 3 days we had connectivity backups. It also serves as a resilient network. Prior, there were all microwave links that were very susceptible to the weather and so forth. And lastly, I just want to touch a little on some new partnerships I'm involved with. This is being initiated by United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean office in Chile. And they want to bring especially English-speaking Caribbean countries working together with those in Latin America. And at the 9th Ministerial Conference in Chile last November, the ministers agreed on a new digital agenda for the next 2 years, up to 2026. And they have set up a working group, Caribbean people alone in that working group, and we have membership from academia, civil society, regulators. So I'm asking anyone who are interested in putting the input into this, that they can see me, and as we work on the next 2 years, delivering some initiatives and projects that help our digital transformation work over the next 2 years in the region. So we have work in the OECS region, CARICOM level, and this new partnership between Latin America countries and those in the Caribbean. So I'll stop there for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Apollo. Just very quickly before we go on to Albert, we know that we've had some other initiatives in the region. I'm very interested. We ended up with only 2 collaborators on CARSIP, but I think when when the project was first conceived, it was supposed to be much wider. What do you think worked and convinced the 2 countries that eventually signed on? What made that difference? And I want to pose the question in that way, as opposed to posing it as what didn't work. I really want to know what worked and what served to convince us. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this was just one component of CASIP, so they also, St. Lucia was involved, so there are different components, and I mean, I don't know why the others did not come on at the time, maybe different reasons at the country level, but we had 3 countries at the time. But this component was very targeted to these 2 countries based on the need. So there are other stuff in terms of G1s that was done in St. Lucia and so forth. So I can't say exactly why others was not on at the time. But for example, we have a new one currently being done, CAR DTP, which is Digital Transformation Project. and that includes Dominica as well. So it's expanded to 4 countries. So sometimes there's less, sometimes there's more. I don't want to give into the reasons, maybe that's
very, yes. And maybe your next appointment will be somewhere in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of St. Vincent and Grenadines, because you're very diplomatic. I'll turn it over to Albert. Albert is going to give us a bit of an overview of ICANN's operations in the region, and actually maybe a little more about what they do outside, not only in the region, but in the wider world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. We've heard a lot about collaboration and working together as a Caribbean over the last few days here at Canto. And in this short presentation, I'm going to try to do 2 things. Give you a sense of what ICANN is all about, and secondly, tell you about how we've been collaborating with Canto and Canto's membership. So ICANN is a global not-for-profit which coordinates the unique system of identifiers of the internet. And in the acronym ICANN, there are 2 N's. One of those N's is for numbers, the Internet Protocol addresses, the IP addresses that each device must have to connect to the internet. And also the second N is for names, domain names, which we use as human beings because we don't remember, we're not able to remember IP protocol addresses every time we want to go to a website or do something on the internet. And the thing about it is when persons hear the term ICANN, they tend to think of a single organization, but ICANN is actually an ecosystem which has 3 key parts. The most important part of the ICANN ecosystem is what we refer to as the multi-stakeholder community. And in that community, there are representatives like yourselves of different stakeholder groups, representatives from business, from governments, from end users, from the technical community, from the academic community, and so on. So this is the community that actually develops the policies that we have to abide by when we actually use the internet. And then there's a subset of that multi-stakeholder grouping, the ICANN board, and then finally you have the ICANN organization. And these 3 entities within the ICANN ecosystem meet 3 times a year, and they discuss and develop ICANN policy. So on this slide, I won't go through all of them. You see where we just met in Prague and where we're having our next meeting in Dublin, Ireland. And we know that sometimes for stakeholders, it's not easy from a financial standpoint to travel to every part of the world where an ICANN meeting is taking place. So we do have a fellowship program where ICANN covers the cost of airfare and accommodation so that important stakeholders generally, can actually participate in ICANN meetings. Now, there are different groupings within ICANN that actually develop the policies. One grouping, as I mentioned, would develop policy for internet numbers, global internet policy. That's referred to as the Address Supporting Organization. And there are 2 groups that develop policy for the names, country code top-level domain names. And I saw a really nice slide from one of the previous presenters, OneCaribbean.ai. So .ai is a good example of a country code top-level domain name. For the Bahamas, we have .bs, for Barbados, .bb, St. Lucia.lc, and so on. So the group known as the Country Code Name Supporting Organization develops policy for those names. And then we have the generic names, .com, .org, .edu, and the many thousands of others which are on the internet. So while those groupings are developing policy at an ICANN meeting, there are also groupings that represent the interests of other stakeholders, the interests of end users, the interests, very importantly, of governments, and the interests of the technical community, the root server community, and the security community. So the policy development process takes place where the 3 organizations are developing policy for names and numbers, while at the same time, governments, end users, technical community are advising the board on the impact of those policies on those different groupings. We understand that ICANN can be a fairly complex place, so there is a prep week before the meeting actually starts, and this time it's going to be on the 13th, 14th, and 15th, and it gives a sense of what's going to be covered in the ICANN meeting. Now, here are some key topics that are going to be covered at ICANN 84, and very importantly, new generic top-level domain names. I'll say a little bit more about that later on. The applicant support program, which gives basically discounts on the application fees for getting your own new top-level domain name. A grant program, there are some funds. ICANN is a not-for-profit organization, but there are some funds that were assembled from a previous round of generic top-level domain names, and those have been converted into grants for different projects, and anyone can apply for those grants within the criteria that are set. And of course, we've been talking a lot about cybersecurity, DNS abuse, and so on. So those are some of the key topics that are actually going to be spoken about at the next ICANN meeting. And of course, there is currently $200 million available for grants in all of the Caribbean territories. And we will speak a bit about who has applied, how much they have applied for, and so on. This is an important slide. This is a big area of focus. You see top-level domain names on there. .com we recognize, .org we recognize, but you would notice that there are some new ones, .charity, .paris, .football, and even some in some internationalized characters. Those actually work. So you can actually see domain names in Arabic characters, Chinese characters, Hindi characters, and so on. And the idea is what we are trying to do is be more inclusive as far as the internet is concerned, and allow more territories, especially underserved territories like the Caribbean, to be able to have their own top-level domain names. For example, our headline sponsor is Liberty. If they wanted to, they could actually apply for .liberty, and then they could do different things with that. They would control how it's used. For example, they could have sub-level domain names for each of the territories where they operate, and they would also control the security of their top-level domain names. So what is going to happen with this new generic top-level domain name round is that you as stakeholders can actually find your space on the internet by having a new top-level domain name. And one other issue that we are going to be talking about relates to law enforcement and prosecuting actual bad actors on the internet and getting access to data that has been redacted. Now, we've been collaborating with three organizations in particular across the Caribbean, Canto, CARICOM, and CARIGNOG. And on this slide, you see the areas that we have collaborated in. We've done a lot of capacity building with Canto members, where we've produced some white videos on different topics and made those available. They are still available. With regard to cybersecurity, we've done capacity building for Canto members, the IT managers, the engineers from different Canto member states. And we've spoken to them about a security layer that makes the internet a more secure place. And we've also spoken about best practice and how you can deploy different methods of managing your domain name system. The next capacity building that we're going to be doing for Canto members, and this is something that Canto members can ask the Canto Secretariat about. We will be doing capacity building with regard to the next round and how you can get your domains and so on. And very importantly, at ICANN meetings, we need to collaborate because not every country can attend ICANN meetings. And in our governmental advisory committee, the CTU is playing a very big role in ensuring that they always attend. They try to mobilize the Caribbean as a single entity so that our Caribbean concerns, our Caribbean interests are featuring when policies are being developed. And of course, we work with an organization called CARIGNOG, where we have their engineers and their technicians across the Caribbean in one space dealing with cybersecurity issues and also looking at resiliency for the internet. So public comment is very important. Working together as a Caribbean to influence policy is very important. So we encourage you to find out what's happening at ICANN and find your space in ICANN and collaborate as a region to influence global internet policy. So I think I did some magic in converting a 15-minute presentation into just under 5 minutes. So I'll hand back over to you, Andre.
We do have a little bit of time. I don't know if we've got any questions from the floor. Anyone on the floor? Albert, I'll pose one question to you. You did say that there's some amount of coordination going on at the ICANN meetings where we have some of those we try to ensure that the Caribbean issues are addressed. Can you give us a couple of examples of some of the particular, or some of the issues that are peculiar to us as a region? And very quickly afterwards, if we could squeeze in another response, Apollo, what is, if you see any kind of role, I know we have the governmental advisory committees, but ICANN is, I think, especially famous for not being really a government organization. So how does really that interaction between ICANN and the GAC operate?
Okay, so here's the thing. I spoke about an opportunity for having new generic top-level domain names, and there's an application fee. Because the Caribbean was not present in the governmental advisory committee when this was being discussed, the application fee is pretty high. So in very simple terms, if we are there as representatives of our different countries, as representatives of our region, we can make inputs and we can express our concerns and say, well, look, you need to fashion this thing so that we in the Caribbean will be able to take advantage of it. And our collaboration with the CTU is such that since they attend most meetings, they're able to get all the information from the ICANN meetings, circulate it to CTU member states, and then try to get together information on what the country positions are so that those positions can feature into the decision making.
Apollo, on the interaction with the governmental advisory committee?
Well, I was part of the process of, based on consultation with Albert, and getting St. Vincent and Grenadines onto that a few years ago. We were not there for many years, but in lobbying with Albert, I was able to recommend 2 members. So we St. Vincent's on that committee, I think, for the last 2 years now. And I think we really should be able to help drive policies that are more in line with those in the Caribbean. And I just want to give me a few seconds to just leave a comment. I just want to close with 2 proverbs that I think are very relevant to our panel here. One is an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you can go alone. But if you want to go far, we need to go together. I think that is very relevant to what we're doing here today. And I want to leave with one from the Bible, Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so does one sharpens another. So we work together. We have different gifts, and by working together, we can get more done for our region than working alone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Apollo, Albert. This will conclude this particular event on the program. I want to thank everyone for being here and paying rapt attention. We've had a little bit of inspiration about partnerships and how we can work together across the region. Just the very fact that we're here, I believe, is an evidence of that and the willingness. So I trust that we will carry this on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you so much. So again, in keeping with the theme of collaboration, we want to continue. I've recognized that's a common talking point for the entire Canto Experience 2025. And staying with that theme, our next talking point, restoring trust, a unified front against telecoms fraud, a matter of fact. Speaking to what scams and what consumers go through, we want to welcome our Vice Chair, the Vice Chair of Canto, Charles Douglas, to moderate this session and bring forward all the top personalities to develop on this most interesting talking point again, restoring trust, a unified front against telecoms fraud. Vice Chair, the floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone. We are delighted to have you join us for this panel conversation on a topic that we think is going to be very interesting, a united front against telecom fraud. We have with us Felipe, founder and chairman of I3 Forum, who's traveled to Canto to share what's being done in Europe and extending an invitation to our regulators and our operators to be part of that. We look forward to that presentation. Then we have Sandra, Chief Business Development Officer, Africa, Europe from Bankai, and to hear a little bit about your experience, how you've implemented some of these things, and what learnings we can get. And we're also privileged to have Thomas Sullivan, Acting Chief of the FCC Office of International Affairs. FCC, we have good cooperation, good relationships, and to hear from your experiences as well. Lots to say. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity to get some questions from the audience. We have lots to say, so it's going to be tight. But to really set the stage for the conversation, we're going to invite Felipe to do a brief presentation. Please.
Thank you very much, Charles. Good morning, everyone. I'm Philippe Millet. I'm the founder and chair of the i3 Forum, which is a not-for-profit organization of the international telecoms. And I'm going to focus today on the Restore Trust initiative, which is an initiative we launched not even 2 years ago, to try and bring everyone together to fight spam and scams globally. i3 Forum is a partner of Canto. We're very honored and privileged to be invited today to share our views with everyone. And as Charles pointed out, we really hope that if you're an operator or a regulator, you will find this interesting and join the discussions. So the first thing I want to point out is the title of this panel is slightly misleading. This is not just telecoms fraud. This is this $1 trillion war against spams and scams, right? Globally, this is $1 trillion gone to scams. In some countries, it's up to 4% GDP. It has a huge impact on the global economy. It has a huge impact on us as citizens, on businesses, on governments, on everyone. And the scammers, they operate as part of organized crime. It's not, you know, couple of teenagers in the basement. It is organized crime. They have scam compounds. I'm going to talk about this. They have incredible means, and they operate through telecoms from anywhere to anywhere, and mostly go unpunished. So this needs to change. The problem is that the good guys, us, mostly, operate in multiple jurisdictions, locally, regionally, and we're up against this global phenomenon. So there are some remarkable domestic, national, sometimes regional initiatives to try and combat this, but we're up against a global phenomenon and we need a global coordinated response. You see a few stats here. There's a lot of focus on cyber, which is great, AI, which is great, but let's not forget that the basics, voice and SMS, are the primary attack vectors today. So we need to make sure that we get this back under control because this is where almost 2/3 of the scam attacks even begin or sometimes are conducted. I was talking about the scam compounds. This is from Southeast Asia, so far from here, but it's true everywhere. We work with UN ODC, the Office of Drugs and Crime, and if you look at the two pictures on the right-hand side, taken a few months apart, somewhere in between Thailand and Cambodia, the first one above is just the river going through fields. A few months later, you have like a whole city that's been built. And this is an example of a scam compound. This is the scale of what we're up against, right? These guys invest millions. They bring people that are usually trafficked and kept captive and forced to work in those scam compounds that operate globally, right? So this, I like to show this because this is Southeast Asia, but it exists everywhere else. This is what we're up against. The UN is doing a terrific job with their Office of Drug and Crimes, trying to help member nations to implement the Treaty on Organized Crime, and we are trying to make sure that they cover the telecom aspects in it. That said, what is it we can do as telecoms? Ecosystem, I speak of ecosystem because it's not just the industry, we need the regulators on board as well. Well, this is where the Restore Trust initiative was born. There's something that needs to be done at a global level by joining forces between the regulators and the industry. This is a busy slide. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but Gives you an example. Each and every country is actually both the target of scam calls, and this is usually where the efforts are focused, trying to protect your people, but usually also the origin of bad traffic, and more often than not, a transit port for traffic. And both the industry and the regulators need to focus on all three aspects. Making sure that you have your numbering plan under control, that you fight against spoofing, that you know who's using what numbers for what usage, and that the operators are doing all the right checks. Making sure that you have KYC in place, know your customer procedures in place, so you know who's actually making those calls. Making sure that you have some kind of traceback mechanisms, both domestically and we're building this, or we want to build this international component to this. So many, many things, and this is just for voice. There's a lot of things we can do on the SMS side as well. Don't want to spend too much time on this, but many things we can do there. We also need to make sure that we let through the legitimate traffic. You can't block everything. You can't block, roaming calls coming from abroad because they have your national number on it, because otherwise, you're blocking all the roaming issues. So we need to work together. And on top of that, we need at the global level some kind of harmonized framework on the regulatory side and legislative side. We need some harmonized tools and practices in the industry that we all do something similar, because all the loopholes that we leave open are going to be used by the scammers. Again, no time to spend too much time there, but there's a lot we can do, and that we haven't done so far. So in order to deliver this, the Restore Trust Initiative is built on two main pillars. We created this new organization that we call One Consortium, which is for the entire industry to get together and work together, specifically focusing on those issues. And we also helped foster a specific forum for the regulators that we call GIRAFFE. Actually, they call it GIRAFFE. That stands for Global Informal Regulatory Anti-Fraud Forum. Every word is important, and you can even add another I for independence. And the two organizations are working together. I explain a bit how they do this, to try and come up with this harmonized, efficient framework that we all need. On top of that, because telecoms don't exist in a vacuum, we are working with, I mentioned the UN, we're working with law enforcement, we're working with banks and payment systems. I'm in touch with the International Federation of the Banks. In the US, for instance, we are initiating discussions with the states' AGs that have this task force on combating crime, robocalls. So we're really trying to bring everyone together around those issues. One Consortium was launched in March 2024, so not even a year and a half old. It's specific in multiple ways. First off, it's really focused on combating scams and spams. We don't deal in spectrum. We don't deal in, we are focused on what is it we can do to combat this issue. We are built to work with regulators, which is a bit unique. I'm not aware of many other organizations that specifically want to work with the regulators at the global level. And another interesting aspect is that it's not just the operators and the vendors, but we have existing industry organizations that are part of One Consortium and bring firepower. I'm going to need to speed up a bit. Quick look at the members. GIRAFFE. GIRAFFE is informal, I mentioned it, neutral. So this is not like a US-led or European-led or an African-led or whatever initiative. This is really important. We're trying to find common ground at the regulatory level to provide a number of recommendations for regulators to implement. Each regulator remains completely sovereign. The regulators do what they want and can do. But having this consensus on interesting recommendations might be helpful. There are about 40 plus regulators already in GIRAFFE. Europe, I mentioned, North America, Latin America, Africa, Middle East, India, Southeast Asia. We have everyone on board and we want to grow. So this is a call for you guys to join. We did a quick survey of the participants, and you can see that there's a lot of talk about spoofing, about protecting voice and SMS traffic. Interestingly enough, there's a number of people who want to also build on Giraffe to go beyond just the policy aspects, but also work on actual cooperation for enforcing and going after the bad guys, which I think is extremely interesting. So this is a brand new organization. If you haven't heard of it, it's only natural. But please do get in touch so you can join. No time for this, but multiple topics that we're covering: traceback, spoofing, industry survey. We identified more than 40 different types of tools, DNOs and whatnot. And on top of voice, we also want to work on messaging. Trying to keep it short, sorry guys. So, call to action. Reach out to me, reach out through Canto. We want to develop partnership with Canto to make sure that the region here is part of this discussion, that you can be part of the global discussion. You can learn from your peers globally. You can also bring your unique perspective and solutions. And you know, just join.
Excellent presentation. Really set the table for us, and now let's have the conversation. Now, I want to start where you ended, right? Fantastic voluntary organization with a lot of success of saving money from different countries, blocking calls, Norway, all over the world. But the Caribbean is not a part of it. And that's why you're here. So can you outline to us what exactly can the regulators in this room or the operators in this room do to be involved? So you said Canto, but you know, is it just tell us those avenues, and we will you know, for the benefit of those here.
So we really try to make it as easy as possible. As I said, it's completely informal. It's completely free. It's based on volunteer work. So if you're interested, reach out to me or through Canto. They know where to find me. And then what we do usually is we sit down with you and your team, go through some of the details. And if you're interested, then you get invited to the various virtual meetings we have. It's all virtual, no travel to forecast. You get invited to the plenaries, you get invited to the working groups, you get to participate in all those discussions, and also you get to participate in the joint work with the industry in one consortium. So there are like a number of joint work groups with representatives from regulators and the industry where we discuss those topics. Convening easier.
Perfect, and any information that you can share ahead of time with Canto, then we can also disperse and share with the membership. Great. The relationship on the Caribbean, with the Caribbean with the U.S. can't be overstated, right? We are really close. There's a lot of traffic in between us. So, Thomas, from the FCC point of view, what's your thought of Giraffe? Are you formally a part of it or not? And what's been your experience?
So, thank you, Charles. And the U.S. has been working on and struggling with robocalls, robotexts. It's our #1 consumer complaint, and it has been for over a decade. And I'd love to just kind of take this conversation up a level and just kind of, I always like to do this in these conversations, talk about the relevance to the collective group of citizens as individuals, and also see the scale of the problem. But by a show of hands, please let me know if you've received a scam call or text in the past month. Okay, pretty significant outreach. It's so bad for some of us that I don't answer this when it rings. I will look at the message and I will call back if it's somebody I know. And this gets to the whole aspect of restoring trust. We should not be settling for having to let a call go to voicemail or identify who it is before we call back. We should be able to pick up a phone and speak to a family member, business colleague, without having to worry about a spam call or risk. So the scale of this problem is profound, and it's profound globally. I'm not speaking from a U.S. In many of the regulators I speak to or talk to, this is a #1 issue. And getting to the criminal aspect that Philippe mentioned, by a show of hands, please let me know somebody who you know or have heard about that has been subject to a scam, whether it be financial or otherwise, from robocalls. And if you're a regulator, I'm sure your hand is going up because you've heard this firsthand. And again, a significant issue. And it's so foundational to telecommunications and the whole aspect of being connected that there is work that we need to do as regulators to get involved and stay involved. For example, in the US, the Federal Communications Commission has taken significant regulatory, policy, and enforcement efforts, levying hundreds of millions of dollars in fines against originators or syndicates that have developed these calls. And it's still a profound problem. So what we have learned is that this is not a problem that any one regulator can handle on their own. It has to be solved through international collaboration and on these measures. And that's why I'm here today, is to ask for regulators in this room to consider partnering with Giraffe, with other efforts, with us bilaterally or regionally to cooperate so that we can help shut down this significant and profound consumer organized crime problem. And I'm happy to detail some of the efforts that we have taken, but I want to stop there, got my top points across, and turn it back to you, Charles.
Great. So there is so much scholarship and work that has come out of Giraffe, albeit a sort of voluntary association and know your customer, know your transaction, spoofing, all of that stuff, and we're not a part of it. So when I was preparing for this panel, I felt a little left out. However, I just want to contextualize this to say it's not that we are without our own tools or approaches. And just by a reminder for the general audience, in March 2020, the FCC did adopt rules requiring the implementation of STIR/SHAKEN on our networks throughout the Caribbean. What's STIR/SHAKEN? It's the secure telephone identity revisited and signature-based handling of asserted information using tokens based on our caller identification standards in the IP portions of our networks. Hard to remember. Yeah. STIR/SHAKEN is much easier. And the extent to which Caribbean operators were unable to implement that on their networks, then we had to submit robocall mitigations plans to the FCC to help ensure that we're meeting that threshold and that standard. So we are participating. There are measures in place. And of course, there are learnings, right, Felipe? And we need to be on the cutting edge of this to improve and get better. Since the implementation of STIR/SHAKEN, to your operators, your aggregators that we use to deliver traffic into the United States, have there been improvements, generally speaking? How is it? Has it been working?
Robocalls are like the game of whack-a-mole, where something pops up, you take care of that one, and then it arises from another aggregator or another gateway provider, another intermediary traffic. And I think Felipe's chart, where you could see that a country can be both an originator, an intermediate provider, or a gateway provider for these calls, which is what makes it so difficult to say that there's improvement, because while you can be successful, and we have been successful, I think, in taking efforts to promote caller ID. So I can see now sometimes on my phone, for example, that it says spam risk. It recognizes that it might be a frequently originated number or a number that doesn't have a basis or a known contact for me. and the operators can identify it as such. We've also allowed operators in the US to use analytics and research to not deliver traffic that they suspect with a high degree of suspicion and data behind it, that it's a spam call. So we're making efforts, they're incremental. Again, the scale of this problem is so profound, and we see that the lucrative nature of how some of these sophisticated scams are working, where they are using now even AI type activities to mimic a voice and to use information that is on the dark web to think that it's my daughter calling me needing help and sending money to someone. Of course I'm going to fall victim to that. So yes, we've seen improvements, Charles, to answer your question, but more needs to be done, and that's why we want to cooperate and make sure that this significant harm, life savings can be wiped out. We've heard terrible stories globally about people falling victim to this. So I think it's incumbent upon the regulators here, to work with the operators to, take prudent steps so that we can help shut down this problem and keep our citizens in our countries collectively safer.
Thank you for your thorough answer. Felipe, you wanted to comment?
I just wanted to, thank you, Charles. I just wanted to build on your analogy with the whack-a-mole game, which I think is fantastic. And what's happening today is each one of us, every country is like with one hammer trying to get at 100 holes. The only way to win is to have 100 hammers hitting at the same time. And this is what we're trying to do. Let's get together, harmonize, hit at the same time, and then we get a chance. That's all I wanted to say.
Fantastic. So now I'm going to invite a practitioner to speak, right? So Sandra, as Bankai Group, Telco, what's your experience in participating in this space, in the forum, and what have been some of your successes, challenges, however you want to put it, that we can benefit from, get learnings in the Caribbean?
You see, what I feel is what Felipe is saying, that it's a cat and mouse game. Like, it's like virus and an antivirus, and we need very unified strategy for it. And what we believe is world is very segmented when it comes to communication. Like, we have developed world where already we have 5G, 4G, or going to be 6G networks. Then you have more than 2.53 billion plus population in Africa and Southeast Asia, where you can say 50% of populations are using smartphones only rather last 48 or 60 months. And the second challenge, initially I will talk about challenges. Second is, in most of the developing world, KYC is a challenge. Know your customer. Maybe in North America or west side of Europe, in most of the Europe, they have very strong national ID programs. But in Africa, in Southeast Asia, still that is a work in progress. So our approach, or what we have seen over the years, in last 10 years, the first layer is KYC. And one of the biggest success story, if you see, in last more than 1 decade is India, with more than 1.45 billion population. They launched a national ID program like 15 years back. 7-8 years back, they launched biggest real-time digital money program. We call it UPI, Unified Payment Interface. And India is the only country where digital payments are free of cost. So 2 layers were being added, stack at KYC level. They brought digital layer to that. And beyond that, in last 3 years, Indian regulator took a massive step on blockchain side. What they did is they launched DLT system at regulator level, distributed ledger system, where each and every message or call has to come via legitimate sender ID. And just to give you a number, you were asking about stir and shaken. 2021, before DLT, daily average number of messages. Before that, we were not knowing how many out of them were authentic. Used to be 3.5 billion messages a day over over total subscribers of somewhere around 1 billion. They implemented DLT. Initial 90 days, it was lots of favor, lots of messages got blocked, lots of mayhem was there. But now it's stabilized. In last 6 months, average number of messages have dropped to 1.2 billion. So imagine in a country like India, single day, spam messages, this is just only one revenue stream, we are talking about messages, were dropped by 2 billion messages a day. So we work with lots of regulators, lots of operators, and I travel to Africa like 100 days a year. So I have fair idea that how regulators and telecom operators are trying to manage it. It's not easy for at least developing world. So there are 3 layers what I feel. One layer is where Africa we should have, like Philippe needs to have in his textbook. You need to work on 3 layers. One is for Africa or some part of Southeast Asia, where still it is work in progress. Second layer is countries like India, Indonesia, Malaysia, those kind of markets. Those have moved up the chain on digital ladder. But when it comes to national level policies, the synergy should happen. Then the first level is for North America or maybe Caribbean nations, where KYCs are very strong and lots of people have strong identity system. There things can move pretty fast. So what we feel is we need a joint platform. Unfortunately, we don't have any UN for telecom operators. So we need a joint platform. Initially, like Giraffe is a very good initiative. We should start at a regulator level. But till the time operators, big operators, and in developing part of the world, like for an example, in Africa, most of the operators are damn powerful. Regulators take shots, but telecom industry is 10 to 15% of the GDP. Like a country like Gambia, telcos add 15% to the GDP. Nigeria, they add 6%. You go to Ivory Coast, 8 to 9%. You go to Tanzania, 5 to 6%. And that drops below 1% in US or developed. So till the time operators in developing countries don't be the part with regulators of this, it would be very tough in near future, but let us hope how things goes. So this is a take from my side. Yeah.
No, very, very well said. A lot of insights there, and I'm sure we all have benefited from that. We have 4 minutes, right? 4 minutes left. And here is my ask, and I'd like each of you to weigh in, and probably starting with you, Thomas, is that, so this is a problem that is dynamic, keeps expanding, it's challenging, making progress, but we have to keep up. To sort of benefit from some safe harbor considerations, what is required from the operators, the regions, in terms of our participation for the FCC and other forums to say, look, we appreciate the effort, it's not perfect, there's still issues, but this is okay and understandable? Or is there such a safe harbor state?
It's a difficult question because when as a regulator, we define our obligations to the consumer and to ensure that there's appropriate consumer protections out there. So however we see the next level of sophisticated measures by those who are looking to commit fraud on consumers, I think as regulators collectively we will want to take appropriate countermeasures to be able to prevent those, and both working at the technical level with operators, at the enforcement level with enforcement authorities of different regulators is something that the FCC has international collaboration with, including international traceback, which is, I think, a great aspect of Giraffe, and it's one of the reasons why we participate is because we might be able to identify where an originating scam-oriented call came from, but then we can't go back to where its source was without the help of other operators. And the same thing for other regulators in the region or globally might find that they can only go back somewhere, but then they need our help to get back to the US. And that's what Giraffe does. It really helps provide a total picture, to your point. Like that's kind of, we can work to that safe harbor. It takes the regulators and the operators working in their different paths to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for asking you that difficult question. So let me ask you, Felipe, what's the kind of feedback you get from the forum, you know, the consortium? Are countries benefiting? Are companies feeling that their engagement there gets them the visibility and the good faith accommodations from various entities such as the FCC and elsewhere? And is there value? Is this one of the reasons that why the Caribbean needs to be a part of it, to benefit from, you know, the best practices and also the credibility of intent to address and mitigate the issues? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, like we said multiple times, and actually I wanted to mention that at the beginning. I was kind of interested that the Secretary General of the ITU in her speech yesterday, or the day before, mentioned building trust as the #2 priority. So it's not just us, freaking out about this. It is good. So the benefit, the value of being part of this effort initiative is that you get to be part of the global conversation. You get to discuss with your peers, learn from them, also bring to them your own experience and what you've tried and what works and what doesn't work. And beyond that, you get to be part of the co-development of solutions that will work for everyone. It's not that there's one size fits all, that's not what I'm saying, but if we can build this harmonized framework, both in the industry, on the industry side and the regulatory side, then we have the 100 hammers we need that are hitting at the same time. And this is really what the value is. To your question about safe harbor, which is a little bit different, but there's something that's very clear, is that if we, at least as an industry, don't get our act together, things are going to happen. The US led the way with a number of things. You can see a number of countries that are taking very strong initiatives to put things under control. An example is Singapore, and there are some others that are looking in the same direction with shared liability models. We're used to having the banks pay when there's a scam. I've been scammed, well, I get my money back from the bank anyway, right? Bank money, highly regulated, makes sense. Telecoms, not really money, so not really strongly regulated in that sense, at least. This is changing. Singapore has a model where if the telecom operators don't comply with the framework that they want, they have a right not to comply, but if they're involved in a scam, then they are liable for it. That type of thing. So we don't want this to happen, or at least we don't want to be just on the menu. We want to be part of the discussion, be part of the discussion.
No, excellent response. Our time has expired. The pleasure has been mine to moderate this conversation. I trust that as a wider audience, we benefited, and it's a conversation that just needs to continue. And thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for listening, and we'll be involved. Photo?
Yeah, let's get the photo up for everyone on the panel. Fantastic. So again, just a few more to go. And again, we thank everyone for their attendance this morning. So we keep the conversation going. Up next, the talking point, from vision to reality, building the Caribbean gigabit society through a federated cloud. And as the Caribbean advances towards greater digital sovereignty and economic resilience, a federated cloud infrastructure offers a timely and strategic solution. Now, this session will explore how a collaborative regional managed approach and cloud model would work. And of course, to chair the panel discussion, a matter of fact, giving a keynote, we welcome Roland Fadrani, Chief Operating Officer, Gala X, and the, of course, panel. We will have the moderator, Giovanni King, CEO of Blue Nap Americas. Well, as mentioned, Roland, a matter of fact, will be here on stage. Also, Gary Kalu from CTU, and Iman Shehi, Senior Director, Public Sector, Cloud Carib, and Judine Hove, I believe I got the last name correct there, Interim Director at BTP St. Martin. So let's welcome the amazing team to walk us through this session. We say welcome.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. As mentioned already, we are going to be talking about sovereign cloud. The first presenter, or the only presenter today, after we will have a conversation among us on how we see this, would be Roland, talking about GaiaX's perspective and how we are planning implementation of a federated or sovereign cloud in the Caribbean. Thank you.
Okay.
Roland.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm from GaiaX, and we are really proud to be part of this Caribbean initiative. And I heard a lot about the goodwill and the commitment of doing things. What we're going to show you in the next 45 minutes is that most of it is available, and we're going to make it happen pretty soon. So, in general, there is a need for interoperable services and data spaces everywhere in the world because different ecosystems need to communicate. So in the past, we had one-to-one exchanges. Then we had few-to-few that was basically in the 90s. And now the thing is, we have such a dynamic development of businesses and value chains that we really need to get into a way where we say we can collaborate with unforeseen business partners in the near future. And I want to give you one example of one of our largest members, which is Airbus, the largest plane manufacturer and aerospace manufacturer in the world. They have a backlog of 8,000 airplanes they're going to build in the next 10 to 11 years. A single aisle commercial airliner has about 2.5 million parts, and they have 10,000 different vendors. And in order to get this value chain under control, they need interoperable and sovereign data spaces, because you can't build a digital twin of something when you only own 15% of the value chain and 85% are coming from your vendors. So with that perspective, the question is, what does GaiaX do? And honestly, my mother is 85 years old, and she asked me, Roland, what are you doing for a living? So I figured to explain this one to my mom. And what I said is, the example is this. There are many, many countries in the world that agreed at some point that their citizens can travel freely. And they said, but we need a couple of rules for that. So they said, okay, let's build something like identification. And that is a passport or a digital ID. And so they said, good, so what do we need on passports? And they set criteria for those passports. So they said, you're going to have a picture, you're going to have your birth date, you're going to have an expiration date, who issued it. Later on, we did it machine readable. Then we said we're going to add, for more security, biometric data. And nowadays, that biometric data is also on a chip, and it works anywhere in the world. GaiaX does exactly the same standards for participants in data centers. from this to this, I hear very often that people say, oh, we're going to do something for you so that you can do something sovereign. We had Microsoft saying this in my country, in Austria, 2 weeks ago. But the problem is if someone else is doing something for you, you already lost sovereignty. So we have the Gaia X governance organization. We're a non-profit organization, and we act global. We have the Gaia X community that does two things. We're in the design phase. We do technology agnostic rules. These are the rules. What do you need to do to become a participant? What criteria is it? The thing like your picture, your birthday. But it's technology agnostic. And then we have an architecture group that is developing rule agnostic architecture to automate that set of rules. Why is that important? Because the enforcement of the rules need to be fully automated in real time and cheap, because you have a lot of verifications to do over and over again. Then we hand this out to an open source community, because everything is based on open standards and open source, and they create a release. And then I, as a CEO, get that release back and hand it out to the digital clearinghouses. These are service providers that run our code on our behalf. So there is no single point of failure. It's a complete distributed system where we have about 15 operators right now, and we will have 1 or 2 in the Caribbean. So you're going to have your source of validation and verification of trust in your region, because it makes no sense to outsource that anywhere else. In order to realize ecosystems, you have a few options. The first option we all know is give me all your data, I manage it for you, and we're good. Maybe not. The second option is a data space where you have a central operator. We do have examples for that, because in some industries it does make sense to have a central operator. But the problem with central operators is, if in this example B and D wants to exchange data, they have to go through what is called a connector. And the connector is operated by the central data space operator. So there's always an intermediary involved in any transaction, and that might cause an issue. And then you have the fully federated system, the data ecosystem approach that we're really promoting. And that is where you have a lot of participants, and they have different catalogs, and in those catalogs they can share services. So you can offer data services, you can offer infrastructure services, backup services, whatever you want. And the participants are identified in their ecosystem. And it can be different ecosystems. It can be different because they are in different industries. It can be different because they're in different regions. That doesn't matter, because all the time you get a Gaia X compliant verifiable credential. So that means if I am in Europe and I'm Roland and I can speak for Gaia X, I have in Europe an EIDAS digital ID, and I present to a clearinghouse my company, my name, and the EIDAS certificate, and the clearinghouse will automatically generate something which is a verifiable credential. It's basically a passport that you can verify digitally. And if we go and do the same thing here in the Bahamas, I would probably not have an EIDAS certificate, but you may have a tax number. And you can do the same thing. You can accept a tax number. So you create a digital ID here based on a tax number, and that creates you a digital verifiable credential. The good thing is those two credentials are compatible. So we can start exchanging data on our terms. We can agree how we're going to exchange data simply because we are identified and we are liable for our actions, because when you are signing something as a company, you are legally liable. So that's basically the concept that we're doing. Now, what we see here in the Caribbean so far is that we have a couple of data centers in different islands, and that's just examples. And what we have established, or actually what the team here has established, is connectivity. That's a wonderful step, and it's probably the most complicated and most expensive one. The question now is, how can we monetize on that? Because just by connecting the services, you still have the problem that you cannot really use those services unless you put something in place that is like a catalog, that the identification of participants, the quality and the sovereignty of the services. So you need to have something that makes them interoperable. And that is actually what we're doing with the trust framework. So that's the part we are handing to the show. We're giving a GaiaX Trust framework into this, and all of a sudden it's no longer connectivity, it's storage services. It's cloud service provider, DPI, digital public infrastructure services on highest level or medium level. You are able to do software as a service, because the smaller the business is, the more you need to move up the stack of a cloud. And these, there are drivers like digital public infrastructure, healthcare data, regulations. We talked with Jamaica yesterday, they have a very advanced data privacy legislation. It's about safety and it's about sustainability. And the benefits you get is resilience, and most important, I think, for the region, scalability. You don't have markets to build on any of these islands, all of these islands, a tier 4 data center, but you don't need to. Because if you have other data center qualities and you have them local, but you're able to do your most critical services, what they call mission critical, into a tier 4, or you have backup, or you have disaster recovery services, then you can really scale the region. And that is something that is, to me, a very important commercial aspect of what we're trying to do. Then you can enforce compliance, especially when you go to public services. You have interoperability and you have potential for growth across the region. Now, there is multiple trust levels in an ecosystem. The first one is the user pane. So you have those islands and you need a custodian that sets the rule. So what is trustworthy, what's a trustworthy digital ID in a certain legislation. Secondly, you need the management pane. You need someone operating it. So you need the ecosystem governance and technical interoperability, and they function like a service catalog, authentication, trust anchors, and other services. And I have the catalog connected with something which is called CES. It's a credential event service, which allows one catalog owner to publish services to other catalogs. So if there is a service in the Bahamas you want to share with all other islands or with specific islands, because it's a backup service of level 3 grade, especially for public services use, for example, you can put it in there and say you can use that service for everywhere. So you create basically a market space, and that service also runs in the clearinghouse. The next layer you have is a participant pane. So that is the users, and this is where we get organizational interoperability. And what you can see here, if CNF is exchanging data, they are not even in the same data space. They are not in the same ecosystem, but they are completely compliant and they are completely interoperable. And the final layer is the trust pane. This is where the common GaiaX Trust framework is implemented, and that is the digital clearinghouses. And for the Caribbean, we will have one, maybe two, but they are connected automatically to all other clearinghouses. All clearinghouses in the world have the same information stored and the same links stored, so that trust can go through the entire community. And I added one additional column to this because I wanted to show you who is doing what here in the Caribbean. So we have CTU being the custodian. We have BlueNap, Cloud Carib, and Brava as the first data centers joining the initiative, and there can be many more. We have the users. We talk about users. We talk about public sector. We're talking about academics, and we're talking about any kind of software as a service you can imagine. And then we have the operator of the clearinghouse, which most likely going to be Cloud Carib and BlueNap. So you can see this entire infrastructure is built on Caribbean companies, but at the same time, it would immediately allow you to connect to any other data space we already have across around the world. And just to close this, what you need is trust between parties or participants, which you get through a common trust framework. You need to agree on the rules for travel of data. Establish transparency and an audit trail. Avoid silos. Silos are always bad, and people don't want to share data, but the problem is silos usually begin in your own space, not with your neighbor. Establish policies along your value chain, and then you need a trustworthy ecosystem. You need to put data to use. Siloed data doesn't perform. You need to do something with data. Rely on trustworthy standards, and we have only open standards, and I know the data centers have the highest cybersecurity standards. And regional legislation is important. Bring together regional legislation to get transparency and interoperability between the islands in the region and beyond. And I wanted to share one thing. We do have digital clearinghouses. These are the ones that are operational so far. I just put in Caribbean Data Center Association on this slide for two reasons. Number one, I told you there will be two clearinghouse providers in the Caribbean, and Caribbean Data Center Association has agreed to be the hub. The hub will be your go-to point in the region to learn more about Gaia-X and get all the information you need. They will disseminate all the information we produce. They will participate in our workshops, in our meetings, in our sprints, because you are now part of the family. You will decide what Gaia-X does tomorrow, together with all the other members. And this is just, I don't gonna go through this is just all the big projects and data spaces we have globally, and that is also one good thing because you can reach out to those guys through our community and see how they solved issues in healthcare, how they solved issues in agriculture, how they solved issues in the tourism industry. They have built those things, and 99% of it is open source, and everyone is really willing to help. So takeaway, trust between parties is achieved through the digital clearinghouses. Access to high quality data is achieved through the architecture and trust framework. Need for trustworthy ecosystems is the ecosystem interoperability. And global legislation challenges through labels and data exchange policies that we can enforce. And with that, let's make data sovereignty real on your terms.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Ronald. Before we get into the rest of our session, I think it's important for us to reiterate again that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but there are projects running in the region that we are supporting through this initiative. I can't mention it enough. The CARICOM Single ICT Space is one of the initiatives that the concept is being used to create what we're doing right here, right now. As we are multiple islands in a very spread region, some small economies, it is very important for us to utilize the infrastructures that we have in place to create that sovereign infrastructure, to create that robust network that we need in order for us to be able to guarantee sovereignty from our infrastructure all the way to our data. And while we're doing that, also providing the infrastructure for us to be ready to have business continuity, disaster recovery, because we are now spreading our data across multiple data centers across the region in a sovereign way. And I must say, in that, as CEO of BlueNap Americas, of course, we are very proud to be able to function as one of the data centers within this ecosystem. For those who don't know, BlueNap Americas is a Tier 4 data center based out of Curacao. Uptime certified as Tier 4, TAA rated 4, rated and certified employees. And this is then one of the infrastructures that we can base our sovereign network on. But doing that by our own wouldn't be good. So we are very happy to know that Cloud Carib is also part of this initiative. And I'm not going to say everything that can be said about Cloud Carib, but I'm again passing the word to Iman to say why being part of this initiative is important for Cloud Carib, and how do you see your role in helping the region to achieve this level of sovereignty?
Thank you, Giovanni. We have, over the number of years, been talking about the single ICT space here in the Caribbean and how we can, from our perspective as a managed cloud service provider, how we could leverage the single ICT space to spread the principles and concepts of open cloud architectures. So with Gaia-X, and funny enough, we were approaching Gaia-X independently from you, and then we discovered that we were both doing the same thing and trying to achieve the same thing, and it made sense to come together. Because obviously what we want to do as a company, of course, we'd like everybody to use Cloud Carib, but realistically, there will be competitors and there will be other entities using cloud services that are not ours. So how do we then have an interoperability level across the region to reduce the total cost of ownership and the total cost of services, and also build an ecosystem for innovation? Because, you know, one of the principal discussions we have with people, startups and doing innovation, is the cost of services. So if we're all operating in a federated cloud on the same standards, using the same interoperability processes, then we have the potential to have a reduced cost of ownership. The other point, from a practical point of view, then, if we start talking about the single market and economy, for example, and people are moving through the region doing different jobs, and we need perhaps, for example, to prove certifications in one country from another country. The federated cloud environment and the Gaia-X approach will allow governments and entities to exchange information in a very secure and trustworthy manner. And one more point on that then, if we talk about potential for commercial success, tourism is a massive component of this region. And you can imagine, let's say, people coming from Europe to the region on vacation and somebody has an accident. Can we get the medical records of that person to be transposed into the region for attention through the Gaia-X process? Because of the trust and interoperability components, we should be part of that ecosystem to allow us to do that exchange of information. So I see a lot of upside, a lot of potential for the region.
Most definitely. In order to expand on this one, Ms. Hoover, as a regulator, how do you see, as Iman mentioned, standardization, interoperability is needed in order for us to create this federated cloud environment? One of the aspects or part of such infrastructure is where the telecoms operators come in. How do you see regulators or contribute towards introducing interoperability, standardization in order to forward this initiative?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that question, Mr. King. As you know, indeed, it is important for us to create an environment as regulators, first and foremost, where we have a reliable cable landing that is regulated and also being monitored and requires periodic renewal of this regulation and licensing. In addition thereto, as a regulator, we need to encourage net neutrality as well within the industry. We want to encourage our operators and our licensing concession holders to create an environment whereby our local data remains local, our regional data remains regional, but also that we have a harmonization within us as regulators in the region with the licensing terms and conditions of these landing cable stations, that the transfer of our data and the interaction between these regulating agencies becomes less robust and more seamless, because we're all operating within the same framework. And I think that sets a good basis then for you all to be able to deploy and amplify the plans that you have for the region.
Thank you so much. Gary, coming back to you, when we're looking now with the role of the CTU and efforts that we know that has been going on for a while, I'm looking at harmonization of legislation and policies across the region, and building on the CARICOM single ICT space and the current initiative that we're discussing here. Where do you see the role for the CTU to further this message, engage governments so that we can have a higher participation?
Thank you, Gio. I think you've said it there, in that our role really should be one of building the awareness, bringing sensitization to our member states, how they can benefit from this initiative. We know that obviously it aligns very nicely with the concept of realizing the single ICT space, where we harmonize legislation, infrastructure, and we benefit from economies of scale. We are all very small island developing states, and it's not always possible to invest, as a single sovereign states in developing our infrastructure, in developing the type of services that we need to provide. So doing it collectively as a region, we see this as being enhancing and supporting the regional development. But beyond that, I think we see the CTU again as being an enabler, facilitating the work that is being done by yourself and Cloud Carib, who are incidentally both members of the CTU, so we support the work that they're doing in the region. They have the infrastructure, they have the connectivity, and now with the help of GAIA-X, we're seeing that we can bring in this trust model, which we can then incorporate into the whole ecosystem. And I think the CTU can really assist in coordinating this regional effort, in working through our member states and ensuring that they support such an initiative and bring the members to the table to ensure that this federated cloud can be of benefit to the entire region and nationally as well, because it does provide the the data sovereignty that we speak of, to have in the region, not having our data being exposed or being housed externally. We now have it within the region, but it's also there's resilience to the idea of having it here, because we then have several data centers across which we can provide redundancy in the region. So I think it's a commendable effort, and the CTU is definitely will support such an initiative.
Iman, can you expand a little bit on the following? When we're looking at, we have all mentioned we have small economies, creating an infrastructure like this would bring, if I look at it from the perspective from Curacao, with a population of 150,000, but then looking at, as we bring on more members, create an ecosystem where we're now talking about over 40 million, what the impact of that would have, especially because as the biggest managed service and cloud provider services in the region, how do you see such an initiative add value not only to you, but even competitors or those that could think to join?
I would certainly say, from the point of view of people who would use services, our services, one of the critical things for the GAIA-X approach is the interoperability and trust part. What it means is you as a user of services, you won't have a vendor lock-in. So you use our services, but you could also use another cloud company's services at the same time. You can have distributed cloud services. And if you choose to move from one vendor to another vendor providing those services, you can do so seamlessly. And I think that's a critical thing, because vendor lock-in is a problem, particularly when you talk about hyperscalers like Google and Microsoft. When you start developing products on their platforms, and you have egress charges and stuff like this, but you also have some proprietary applications and systems. So using this approach allows the users to have more choice. Obviously, it'll make the environment much more competitive from a cloud services delivery point of view, and I think all of those things are critical. And entities like Cloud Carib, we always say we rely on service. Service excellence has to be our game, because there's nothing else for us to do. But it means, as a user or potential clients, everybody else will have to step up their game, because now you'll have the flexibility to move around the region. And it'll also, I think, drive the innovation part, where maybe more service providers will come on stream, join in the GAIA-X ecosystem, and then we have a reduced cost of ownership and a reduced cost for services in the region. And that should drive economies of scale. There's one other point, I think, which is very important, because Roland mentioned this in his presentation, is that the hubs and clearinghouses that will be in the Caribbean are integrated with all of the other service providers. Why is that important? It's important because, as business owners and people, who are part of the ecosystem, you now have potential clients beyond the immediate marketplace. And Europe is a market of 450 million people. So it works both ways. We can use it internally to create our own market, but we can also then access external service providers and external business people to develop more business products to export from the region. So I think these are very critical things as far as I can see.
Perfect, thank you so much. Roland, being that the Caribbean is a very diverse region, 34 different countries or territories, speaking different languages, different legislations, in your experience and implementing this approach in other regions, what would you say are the issues or the things that we need to take into consideration at this early stage in development so that we can have a successful rollout or implementation of this process?
So first of all, it sounds a bit like Europe to me. We have 27 different countries in the European Union, I think, also most of them speaking different languages. And there's some things that are harmonized, but not everything. I think what you really need to get started is, it's a very simple thing. I do like those 4 numbers I told you yesterday, 75, 21, 4, and 1. And what are those numbers? This is market capitalization per continent. So 75% of all cloud service provider market capitalization is in the US. 21% is in Asia. 4% is in Europe, so we're not a star at all. And 1 is rest of the world. So I think it's really important that the region, and that's the spirit I got the last 3 days, that the region starts to think region first and not country. One of the problems we have in Europe is that the large countries think country first. And that is the beginning of a lot of obstacles that are completely unnecessary. So that's the number 1. And the number 2 is be flexible in identifying in each of those different nations what can be your trust anchor. Is it a VAT number? Is it a social security number? Is it a company registration number? Whatever you have. But be flexible and get it done fast, because the first thing you need is participant IDs.
Perfect. So Gary, again, looking at what has been said just now by Roland, and the role for the CTU, as you all sit in front of governments, ministers, when it comes to that identifier, what are the developments in the region right now that you are aware of, that you can share with us? Where would be the challenges that you think that we need to address?
Yeah, we see many of our member states now moving with the concept of a single ID, smart ID. So, and they've been implemented in several of our member states as we speak. I don't think that in itself should create a challenge, because as Roland was saying, we can adopt, any ID that we could, I guess, that could be secured, or that we can, use to identify, specific participants. So I don't see where we are with respect to having unique IDs or having, numerous IDs across the region being an issue. While some, as I say, member states are moving forward with implementing smart IDs, others are still, in the process of identifying solutions. But I think the idea really now is to work with our members, bring them on board, sensitize them, make them aware of what you're doing here. And I don't want to put a plug for our ICT week, but certainly at the end of September, the CTU will be hosting its ICT week in Jamaica, and I think it will be a good opportunity for us to perhaps host a workshop or to report on where we are with respect to the development of this ongoing project here. Perhaps within the next couple of months, we can see some pilots being initiated, and it will be a good opportunity there for us to assess where we are, what are some of the things that we need to do in pushing this forward and have a good opportunity as well to engage all ministers who and high-level government officials who will be there, you know, to really get them on board as well.
Ms. Ufu, I see you want
Yes.
to join in.
I'm happy that you mentioned that because, again, the smart ID concept is something that is going to be very key in the success of this rollout that you guys are busy with. And that there again comes into play now the harmonization of all the participating island states. And I look at my country, for example, each resident has sometimes 2 or 3 different identification numbers. So I think it would be important for you to also take inventory of all your member countries of the CTU and ring the alarm that for us as a region to be able to work together and to really make this a successful something, let's start thinking in this process and invite our heads of state, invite our regulators, but also our operators, so that we can all start to, together as a unit, put the pen to paper, as we say, to begin this process. Because again, I think again, the how do you mention it? The trust token,
yeah.
the trust anchor, is one of the key points in getting this going.
Roland, do you want to elaborate
Yeah.
a little bit more?
I wanted to make one thing clear because this is something we can really help to speed up. You have different digital IDs, and there is a political will to harmonize them, but our experience is that takes a while. It took Europe more than 5 years to go from EIDAS 1 to EIDAS 2. And what we did in order to overcome that problem is we accept different types of identifications to obtain a Gaia-X participant ID. So you can start with having completely different methods, but you need to have the trust anchors for each of them, and they can exist in parallel. So in Europe, we allow 4 different identifications to obtain a Gaia-X participant ID. The point is, this helps you accelerate, because what we do is we take your identification and your claim. We need the trust anchor to verify it's true, but then we wrap it in a Gaia-X verifiable credential, and that's the point where it's completely interoperable. And that gives you, an advantage of speed, because you can start and then fix the harmonization in a second step, because I know that for policymakers, it's much more effort to harmonize across 24 countries than it is for us to wrap it in the same way.
Definitely. Iman, once again, coming back to you, we're talking about this federated cloud, looking at how we could assist with disaster recovery, business continuity, creating that federated cloud and being public or private within our own region with our own infrastructure is very important. But especially, at least for me, I still think there is a role where maybe hyperscalers can play a role in being part of the totality. Before I come back to Roland on this one to see how it happened in the areas where this process was already implemented, what would be your perspective on this? How do you see that interoperability, if you want, or that competition between what we do in the region as opposed to?
Well, I mean, clearly, not all data is of a level that required certain to be sovereign, let's say, or in jurisdiction. It's mostly personal identifiable information and some critical data. So it's not a kind of a zero-sum game. It's all or nothing. So there are opportunities to use hyperscalers where it's appropriate and necessary. But the interesting thing about Gaia-X, and I don't know if the hyperscalers are members of Gaia-X or not. So once they're members of Gaia-X, then you have that trust relationship. So we know already that we have interoperability platform, we have a standard of trust, and we have a controlled environment. So of course, in that scenario, you'll be able to use a hyperscaler for certain data. It won't remove the fact, for example, if you host data in the US, it's subject to the US Cloud Act. That's still going to be the case. or a FISA warrant or whatever it is. But at least you know that you can host data through Gaia X in hyperscalers or local, depending on your business need and depending on the base. With regard to, and one more comment just with regard to the discussion you were having about what to use as an identifier. I think most countries in the Caribbean have VAT, for example, so you could use a VAT number. I think all countries have some kind of a business license or corporate identity number. So I think we have these kind of numbers that exist already that we could use, and as Roland said, not to do something in parallel. It would be great to have a common standard throughout the region. It obviously makes business much simpler, but as we don't have it yet, not to delay starting to implement what I still say is the real implementation of a single ICT space. Let's use what we have, and we have a number, 2 or 3 approaches that we can already adopt for a country. So I think we can definitely move ahead while in parallel doing what you had been talking about.
Roland, for you, just to plug in a little bit more on the hyperscaler perspective, what was your experience in other regions with that, let's say, collaboration between the homegrown as opposed to the hyperscaler approach?
Okay, as I said earlier, Europe has 4% market capitalization of cloud service provider. So moving to a Europe-only data center infrastructure is just an illusion. Very simple. We don't have enough capacity, and we need to think about the workloads. And as Eamon said, it's not a black and white decision, it's a slider. Think about data to protect. Is your sales pipeline something you need to protect? The one from this month, yes. The one from 2021, maybe not so much. So you really need to see what it is. The hyperscalers, they like the idea and they dislike the idea. The thing is very simple. We have a lot of members that are selling hyperscaler products. They're cloud service providers and they're reselling their products. And there is different options on certain levels of sovereignty. One option is that you are, and that's what, for example, T-System does in Germany, they resell Google, but they use technologies like zero trust technology, that they have external key management, so they basically encrypt all the data with a key that Google doesn't have. So if they have to provide data to Google Inc., it's encrypted. So this is not giving you 100% of safety, but it helps to a certain point. It is what we call Gaia X label level 2. But then there is also label level 3, where the operator needs to be immune against foreign legislations, which means he has to be owned 51% in the region. And that is what we call Gaia X label level 3. This is something the hyperscalers don't like so much. But what we do there is, again, we have providers that use stacks from the hyperscalers. All hyperscalers now provide stacks. It's not all the solutions you can get, but you have a Google stack, you have an Azure stack that you can deploy in your data center, and you have at least the basic core services from that technology then hosted in your data center. And I think that's a start for interoperability.
Mr. Foot, to take it to the next one, when it comes to sovereignty again, and maybe not totally your piece of the pie, but when it comes to data protection within St. Martin, can you elaborate on that a little bit for us, and how do you see that interoperating in an ecosystem that we're trying to create here?
Okay, for us as an island, St. Martin, we have half Dutch, half French. So automatically the GDPR comes into place for us. And that brings its own challenges, given the limited resources we have as a country to actively monitor and enforce all the regulations tied to the GDPR. This is a very robust regulation with very heavy fines. We have still made an awareness campaign. We have ensured that all the high-risk organizations were made and sensitized to what their due diligence needed to be to implement proper regulation for GDPR. But on St. Martin also, the actual implementation of the GDPR fell under the Ministry of Justice. and not under our ministry. So there is then a little silo mentality whereby then we're very proactive in raising this awareness, but the actual execution of the legislation itself is what will be then the long and heavy, robust thing. But in either case, though, it still is a very important matter for us as the regulatory authority, and we always raise awareness in every context that we see that it can become a liability for anyone doing anything within our territories, to keep in mind that there is GDPR compliance.
Gary, with the helicopter view, again, knowing that we have different legislations across all of the island states or nations, what has the CTU been doing, or not to create awareness, but to know how far the development is when it comes to protecting our data? Can we identify countries or islands where there is 100% data needs to be retained within the same jurisdiction? And what would be, let's say, the segue to create openness to move forward?
Yeah, I think we have to be, we have to understand that not everybody will be in the same place at the same time. So there will be challenges, and I think what we really need to do is to perhaps move forward with the ones that we have. There might be a few who are ready to take this initiative forward. Let's start with them. We can't wait for all to be perfect. Let's start with what we have, do the proof of concept, show the value, and then people will come on board. I think from a legislative perspective, we do have some who are behind. We have some who are in better positions with respect to their data protection laws and sovereignty laws and the whole suite of digital legislation. But we could start with the ones who are prepared and ready to take this forward and build on that as we move forward.
Thank you very much. In closing, I would like to give everybody the opportunity to say some keywords so we can round off this session for this morning. Roland?
Yeah, maybe one thing that I think is important in your position, don't be too humble, be bold. Just build this thing out. Don't try to solve every problem on day one, because you will keep thinking about problems in 2 years. Just get started and take low-hanging fruit.
Thank you very much.
Well, at the risk of sounding ironic as we're sitting up here talking, we should do maybe less talking and more acting. So I certainly would like to see us, this project now, we're really advancing it, and we have to deliver it and get it out there for people to understand and see how it actually works. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Ms. Uvo?
I think as the regulatory authority in a small island nation of St. Martin, I definitely see the added value for this for us, because we are part of the hurricane belt. And once again, recovery after such instances is very much of importance to us, for our governments and our private sector. So I am committed to this as much as you guys are. Thank you.
Gary?
Yeah, I think at that level, the regional level, the CTU certainly will support this initiative. It does bring value, and I see, once there's a proof of concept in place, and there is, wins that we can show along the way, I think we can certainly take this to the next level.
Thank you so much. What I would like to say is, like, we're presenting an initiative. I would like to invite everybody that's in the room that is from one of our island states, one of our nations. We need to know where the data centers are. We want to engage with them. We want to engage with everybody that in one way or the other is part of this ecosystem. So please approach us so we can take this forward. We are not about talking, we are about doing. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening.
That's right. Let's get a shot there with the panelists.
Yeah.
Front and center. Thank you so much again to the amazing team.
Thank you, Gary.
And of course, we're going to get ready for another presentation. Before that,